In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create the simple button. So the first thing I did, and actually if you have any questions about how this galaxy is set up, there's a video on my YouTube channel. It's the one that's been most looked at. It's how to create a simple galaxy. Then I go through how to set this particular layout up. But in this case, I've created a tool set called Simple Button. And this tutorial follows a post that I did on my blog called Simple, Maybe Not. And essentially it was a fellow asked me a question. He said, hey, I've got 20 years experience with other platforms, but not Wonderware. I was just wanting to create a simple direct action command push button with text that was, the color was dictated by a separate action tag. And he said, I was surprised that I couldn't find anything like that on the standard, as a standard graphic. So I first thought about it and said, yeah, that's pretty simple. And then as I began to drill in, I realized that maybe it's not so simple, because you have to understand how the company that you're working for or the company that you're doing the system for, what their standards are for embedding graphics. And there are multiple ways of doing it. I mean, you can embed graphics, you can not embed graphics, you can have a combination of embedded or not embedded graphics. So in the case for this example, I'm going to show you, essentially I'm going to create a symbol, graphic symbol that I'm going to call test screen, that will actually drop into the View app. So we won't be doing any direct embedding of objects in the View app. While you could do that, there are a lot of reasons why it's better not to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do under, where was that, simple buttons, right here. I'm going to create a new symbol. And by the way, to do that, you just said new tool set, new graphic tool set, called it simple button. So I'm going to create a new symbol. So the symbol pops in. We're going to name that test screen. And then test screen is going to determine also the size of the screen that I want. So I'm going to just drop a simple rectangle on that guy. And I'm going to set it to 800 by 600. Just by setting the width and height to 800 by 600. And we'll set the, let's see, put that guy at 0, 0. We're going to set the background color just by going up here. And I like a kind of a dark gray. Do whatever you want. So now we've saved that. That's going to essentially, that is our screen graphic. And so all of our graphic changes will be dropped onto that symbol. So now if you look down here where I have the actual View app, we're going to go into the View app and create a screen that we can then drop that test screen symbol into. So we'll do File, New Window, call it Test Screen. Well, if I can spell, and I set it at 0, 0. Let's make it 800 by 600, since that's what we did with our test screen graphic. We'll hit OK. Now we're going to go here. This little guy is the Embed Orchestra graphic symbol. Well, there it is. And we're going to drop it right here. And we can make sure that it's positioned at 0, 0. If it's not, you can always move your cursor to get it where you want it to be. I like it at 0, 0, just as a good reference point. And that's it, we're done. Now we're done with InTouch. We won't have to make any more changes in InTouch for this particular example anyway. And I'll go ahead and deploy the changes. Now I'm running the View app on the GR. So everything is being done here on this local computer that I'm working on is the GR. So now we'll get right into the meat of the business. We're going to get new symbol. And this one we're going to call direct button and version 1. Because I'm going to do 2 versions. So version 1 is going to be a direct acting button that's Boolean. So it's got a 2-state for the command, obviously, 0 or 1. And then a 2-state for the color. So it's either color A when it's false and color B when it's true. The second version of this that I'm going to do we'll have the color as an integer so that we can have multicolors. And I'll show you the different ways you can set up the text style animation by a Boolean truth table or a integer truth table. So we open up so let's get our graphic opened up. We've got an empty canvas. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of custom properties. Now, you don't have to have custom properties. You can put your direct IO reference right on the animation that you put in there. Personally, I don't think that's the best practice because creating custom properties gives you more isolation and flexibility later on. And I can show you what I'm talking about there, but that means you'll actually be able to change a reference to a graphic without having to go in and reprogram the graphic. All right, so let's do that real quick. So we're going to go over here and we're going to create a couple of properties. I'm going to create a property called command, and this is where they're both going to be Booleans. So me.command. So keep in mind that everything we do in this example is geared toward using it with system platforms. So every graphic symbol is going to have a template object in the platform. And what this me does later, it'll be used later with the owning object to say whatever object it attaches to is going to have a similar attribute called command. Now, the next property, I could have left it open. It's just going to be label color. And label color is also going to be a Boolean. Label color. Same thing. So now we have our two basic properties we're going to use in this example. Now, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a button. So here's our button. And if you notice when I brought the button in, it defaults with its own text. If you look over here, it's the text property. Well, I'm going to delete that out because I like for this thing to work when we're going to create a separate graphic that's going to drop on here to control color for the label. The other thing I want to do is I want to use good practice in my naming so that 6 months from now I'll know what the heck I was doing. So this is our command button. Then we're going to create, and actually we could go ahead and let's go ahead and drop. So we're going to choose the push button animation. And there's actually a couple of ways of doing this. You could use the push button animation, which is pretty cut and dried off of a template, or you could use an action script and write your own action script for how this command button is going to operate. In this case, I'm just going to go with a Boolean. We're going to, if you'll notice that I'll type the C, and there is IntelliSense in this version of Wonderware. This is 2014 R1. The IntelliSense will go through and browse all the properties that are there. So it's right there. I can just click it. That is the command property now. It's going to be a direct action, and the rest of it I'll just leave as default. So when this button gets pushed down, it'll be a 1, and when this button gets lifted up, it'll be a 0. Next thing we're going to do is create the text. We'll drop him here, and I'm just going to call him label. And let's go ahead and set up the font color and everything. Let's use Arial 14 so we can get it sized out, and let's put it center. So this little guy right here, the line centers, and that puts it right dead center. And let's go ahead and give it a name so we know what we're dealing with. And this is going to be text label color. That's the name of that, or let's just call that text label because that's really all it is. Now we're going to establish our animation on this graphic. So we're going to choose text style Boolean for this case, and text color, what did I call that? Label color, that's right. So label color, and in this case let's make it be bright blue, and let's get our font set up correctly as well to match this font right here because this is our default font. That's what we centered on. And this guy, when it's off, it's going to be black. And let's make that, there you go. Okay. So those are our, and that's it. We're done with this guy. Now let's save him. All right, so now that we've completed the graphic portion, we're going to move down to the orchestra object portion. So I'm going to need to create an object template. I'm going to start with user defined. Under derivation view, go to user defined, right click, new derived template. So we're going to derive a template off of the user defined, and we're going to call it the same thing. We're going to call it direct button v1. So this is going to be the user template for direct button version 1. Let's open them up. So we're going to create a couple of Boolean field attributes. You know what? Hang on just a second. Okay, before we do that, for test purposes, I'm going to create a couple of UDAs because I'm not going to connect this to Modbus or something for real I/O tests. So another good way to do testing, internal testing, is just to create a couple of UDAs. And so we're going to call this UDA command. It's going to be a Boolean. Just make sure it's user writable, which it is by default. And then we're going to create UDA label color. Again, it's Boolean user writable. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can go over and create our field attributes. So we'll call this one command. And just leave these by default. It's discrete, it's an input output. We're going to call this the command action. Okay, here is where you would put your input source, your actually direct connection to your PLC, RTU, simulator, etc., OPC, whatever. In our case, because I'm going to use this I'm going to test this just by using the object viewer, I'm going to connect it to something internal. me.uda command. And then the other one I'm going to create is going to be label color. It's also a Boolean. Let's just call it label color action. And here I'm going to put me.uda, you guessed it, label color. All right, so there we go. So essentially, this object has two attributes. One controls command, one controls label color. And that's all we need to do there. So let's save that guy. All right. And you would create an instance of that, we'll just go new instance. And we call it anything we want. I'm just gonna leave it the default. So it's direct button v1, and now of course we want to get it deployed. And when I created this, if you go to the deployment view, you'll see that it's unassigned. There were a couple of ways I could have assigned it automatically. I could have set this as default before I did anything with it, and then it would have automatically gone there. But the other, I can just drag it down. So let's just drag it down to that area. Now we can deploy it. Okay. So I said I was going to use the object viewer. Actually, I think I'm going to do something a little different, make it a little easier. So we'll just go back to our direct button here. So we've created, okay, so this guy's ready to go. Now we'll go to test screen. Okay, in test screen, so now that we have the name of our instance, I'm going to use rename and do a Control-C, which puts the name of the object in the clipboard for me. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to use the embed graphic. There's our graphic, and now I'm going to set the owning object. If you see, this says the owning object property. I'm going to put the name of the object and the name of the attribute for this guy. So let's see, what would that be? Nope, back it up. It's just the name of the object. Now what I'm going to do is, to do testing, I'm going to go up and actually use some of the built-in stuff that Orchestra gives you. So let's use one of the lights and indicators. So let's go back here. Okay, so let's choose orchestra light and indicators, use this guy. So what I want is I want this light to come on when the command attribute is a 1. So I just plug that in right there. It's going to blink red, green. We can turn that off. So when this button gets pushed down, it's going to become a 1. This light will come on. Now I want to be able to turn the text color on separately. So we're going to embed it. Let's find a button graphic. And these are the built-in graphics I was telling you about. I mean, you might be able to find something that's close to what you want, and then, or maybe you just modify one of these. That's another way. So let's find a button, and let's just grab this guy. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put, this is a toggle button, and it's going to be label color. It's going to connect to my other attribute in my object. All right, so there we go. So there's my, now I just save that. Okay, and then I want to redeploy my view app. Okay, now to test, I'm going to run the InTouch App Manager. I'm going to find that guy and run him. So now we're going to see the view app in action. Okay, yes, changes accepted. And we're going to choose test screen. And all right, there we go. Now I know that I have to log into this guy for the security to work. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. So now when I push this down, it should turn to green, and it does. So the label action works. Now to test the label color, we just click this guy and see it changes to our bright blue. All right, and that's it. So that's that one. Now, let's do the second one real quick that I talked about. Let's just leave that up. Okay, so the second one, and a real quick way to do this is just do a duplicate graphic, and we'll call him V2. And we're going to go up here. And it's real simple. We don't need to change anything on the button. In the text, we're just going to change from a Boolean to an integer. So go to truth table, make this an integer. And now let's let our 0 be a black. Let's let 1 be bright blue. Okay, let's let, I'll get that too. This one be or purple or magenta rather, and that'll be 2. And then let's do another one that'll be dark red at 4. Okay. So those are our colors, and this is, I mean, you can put as many as you want. This is whatever you want it to be. But now we have a way to control our colors. So we need to go ahead and change this guy as well to an integer. Okay, and that's really all we have to do. So let's save our graphic. Okay, now let's go back down to our user-defined. And these are a little trickier. You can't really duplicate them. But one thing I could do is actually create a derived off of version 1 and call it version 2. Or I could just create another one off of the user-defined. So now one thing I can do is I can actually rename this guy, and I'll just put an underscore behind it, and I'm going to export it. Okay, and then I'm going to put that back. All right, now I'm going to do an import. If I can find it. we go. Okay, and so then what we did by changing that name is we brought in a new one now, and so we can now rename it as version 2. Okay, and then go into that template and just change this label color to an analog. Okay, and then go over to the UDA and change that guy to an integer. And that should take care of that. So now we have a second version of the object template that uses that as an integer. We'll create a new instance. Okay, and we'll do the same thing. We'll go to the deployment view, bring him down to the engine, and deploy him. Okay, and again, I'm going to get that guy's name. Go back up to the test screen. All right, now we're going to, let's bring that out a little bit. Let's get this. Let's see. Version 2, we'll drop it right here. Got the same thing here. We'll just copy and paste that guy over there. And now we need something a little different here because I want to input an integer value. So let's see if we can find something that will allow us to do a set point. Okay, that's a good one. Let's do this one. So that'll allow us to change increments. Okay, so this guy, I'm going to change this to version 2, and let's make sure that it's going to match. And this guy, we're going to change it to the same thing we had here, except it'll be version 2. Okay, so what I've done is I now have this incrementer graphic. So the max in our case is, what did we say? I think it's going to be 3. The min is going to be 0. And the change amount will be 1. Let's give it a rip, see what we got. Save that. Okay, let's redeploy. And then we're going to go back to our view app. There we go, yeah. Okay, let's go to test screen. Okay, I gotta log in again. Every time you do a redeploy, it's gonna knock you off of your login. Oops. Okay, so, well, that's not good. Okay, let's see what the heck's going on here. So, I wonder if maybe the logger will tell me something. Not really saying anything to me. All right, let's go back to our graphic. I'm going to double check that guy. Oh. Make sure we got the owning object property correct. Ah, forgot to put the owning object property in. That'll do it. All right, so let's do that. Let's go back and do it again. Do a redeploy. Go to the screen. Let's log in. And push it down. We see we have that button works. Black, blue, purple, and that's probably dark red. You can't really tell, but anyway, you get the idea. So that would be a way to get multiple colors. And that concludes this tutorial on direct button 1 and 2. One was a Boolean, one uses an integer. If you found this has been helpful for you, please like and subscribe. Leave comments for me if you have some suggestions, or you need any other, if you have any ideas on things that you'd like to see explained or demonstrated. I also have a book, Step-by-Step Orchestra Scripting, which is going to be published in the next 90 days. If you're interested in that, you can head on over to www.learnscada.com. Check my blog out at the end. There's, I believe, a link for the book. Or you can head on over to www.charlesbvance.com and get your name on the email list, and I'll be notifying that list when the book is getting ready to launch. Thank you guys. Have a good day. I appreciate you.